Warning, the content you are about to hear on this podcast contains references to sexual abuse. Discretion is advised.
I think that I'm just a rock chick.
I would describe my music and my sound as Avril.
It's the best damn thing.
Welcome back to another episode of the Best Damn Avril Lavigne podcast, a facts and trivia-based podcast about Canadian pop singer Avril Lavigne. I'm your host, Andrea DiFrancesco. In this bonus episode of the Best Damn Avril Lavigne podcast, we're going to catch up with all the latest happenings with Avril, including the release of her new song with Nate Smith and a surprise leak of a Meredith Brooks cover. But first, let's run through a little life update. So since we last left off, I believe the last episode I posted was at the end of September, and I had talked about going on my honeymoon pretty soon and moving into a new apartment after that. So a couple weeks after that episode was posted, me and my husband went on our honeymoon to Walt Disney World. And yes, we were there in the middle of Hurricane Milton, but even in spite of the hurricane, we still had an amazing time. And to this day, this is over a month later, we're still talking about that trip, still going through our pictures, and every single day we'll be I miss Disney and we want to go back. And we keep thinking about all the things we're going to do next time that we go and just planning basically planning our next trip, even though I don't think we're going to be able to go back for probably some years, and there's going to be different things there by then, but we just keep talking about what we think we want to do the next time we go. And even though it didn't turn out quite the way we'd hoped because of the hurricane, a couple of our dinners ended up getting canceled and the parks were closed for a day and a half, so we did lose some time in the parks, but we just tried to make the most of our trip, and I think we still managed to get a lot of things done and see a lot of things that we wanted to see, and just experience as much of it as we could in spite of losing a day and a half. And with some things being closed and those kinds of things, I think we still managed to make the most of our trip, and we made a lot of amazing memories. And the trip was also much needed after everything that we've been dealing with. As I had alluded to in the last couple of episodes, I talked about how we had these noisy neighbors living above us, and that was why we were moving. So a couple weeks after we got back from our honeymoon, we moved into our new apartment, which is where I'm recording from now. So this is the official first episode being recorded from my new space. So a couple housekeeping items to go along with that. In my last apartment, I was recording in a walk-in closet, so everything was much more insulated from noise there. But now in my new apartment, I don't unfortunately have a walk-in closet to record out of, so I'm just recording in our spare bedroom. And so because of that, we do hear more people coming and going, the sound of people coming and going, a lot more people going up the stairs and stuff. And then sometimes my upstairs neighbor, she might be walking around and stuff. So hopefully we won't hear too much of those noises, or we also get random building noises, the sound of the heaters coming on and those kinds of things that unfortunately I can't really do a lot about that to control that. So hopefully with all those random noises of people noises or building noises, hopefully they're few and far between. They don't really interfere too much with the recording, but I'll do my best to edit them out, or hopefully the noises don't come through too much for it to be too distracting. And also the room that I'm recording in, I said, because it's just a spare bedroom and not an insulated closet, the sound tends to bounce off the walls more, so it's more echoey in here. So I'll do the best that I can. Hopefully the echo isn't too bad, it's not too distracting, but I think it definitely does change the sound quality a little bit from what you might be used to hearing from the past episodes. There are things you can do to kind of mitigate the echo in rooms. You can put these foam things around microphones, but I'm not sure if I would be able to do that. I'm just kind of still figuring out my setup with my microphone and my computer and all those things, trying to figure out the best way to have my recording set up. So I'll kind of just have to learn as I go and figure out what works best. But hopefully the echo sound isn't too distracting for now until I can maybe figure out whether it's getting a different microphone or doing something to mitigate the echo sound, or maybe just leaving it as it is, and hopefully it just isn't distracting from your listening experience too much. But overall, the new apartment that we're in, I had talked about in the last couple episodes, I'm my neighbors were so bad that they were keeping me up at night and they were stressing me out, that I'd be crying all the time and stuff like that. And I was so depressed. And luckily in our new apartment, we have better neighbors that are, they still make normal, a normal amount of noise that you would expect, just living noises. But I'm able to sleep at night, and I'm able to actually have quiet enjoyment of my apartment again. And hopefully that will also translate into the recording of the podcast, that I don't have to worry too much. Aside from those random noises that I talked about of people either coming or going, and maybe my neighbor walking around occasionally, something like that. But hopefully it won't be too bad. And that, I don't have to worry about like, oh, I can't record right now because my neighbor's kids are like running back and forth upstairs, or like the guys, yelling while playing video games and that kind of thing. Like hopefully all those noises are a thing of the past. So I would say overall, like for anybody who might be wondering about how, we ended up faring with our moving experience, like we're still adjusting and getting settled in and like kind of, finding places for things and getting pictures on the wall and those kinds of things. But, we're still adjusting, we're still getting settled here. But definitely I would say it's an improvement upon our last place for sure. The next housekeeping item that I wanted to address is with the holidays coming up. Like I'm trying to get this posted around the time of Thanksgiving in the US. So side note, speaking of Thanksgiving, I just want to say a quick thank you to everybody who's been patient with me all this year with getting episodes posted. Like I know there hasn't been nearly as many as any of us would have liked for there to be. But unfortunately, my whole year was just like filled with one thing after another that prevented me from being able to post regular episodes. Like the first 6 months I was working on planning my wedding. And then right after that was when all the neighbor stuff happened. And then right after that, we went on our honeymoon. And then after that, we moved into a new apartment. So like, and now we're at the holidays and then the year is over. So unfortunately, I didn't get to post nearly as many episodes this year as I would have liked. And that was just, like I said, because of life happening. But hopefully in 2025, I'll be able to post more episodes. But now with the holidays coming up, like, things get busy and everything. And so I don't know how many more episodes I'll be able to get out like this for the rest of this year. But I'm hoping in 2025, I will be able to get back into posting more regular episodes because as much work as it is to do the podcast, like I'm just like one person doing all this. Like I don't have a team of editors or anything like that. Like I do everything myself. And so that does take a lot more time, especially because I do work full time as well. So I just kind of do this in my spare time and it's just a hobby, more than anything. But I do it because I enjoy doing it. And I do want to be able to do this more regularly. I have so many ideas planned with just like fun or interesting things. I have this running list of ideas that I've had since I started this podcast a few years ago, and I just haven't been able to get to them yet, but I know I want to. So that is kind of the goal for this upcoming year is to try to get back, hopefully now that like my wedding is past, we're getting settled into the new apartment, that maybe I can kind of start devoting more time to podcasting again. And like once I get my recording set up the way that I like it, the way that will work for me, that I can get like more episodes out. But I just want to say thank you for everybody that's been listening this year and who always leaves like really nice comments and reviews and say that you enjoy it and stuff. And hopefully in 2025, the Avril maybe will drop some new music or something so that we have like more fun stuff to talk about as well. And speaking of leaving like ratings and reviews and comments and stuff, I also wanted to mention at the end of every episode, I always ask like if you can leave a rating or review to help more people find the show. And I don't just like say that for the sake of saying that. Like if you've listened to other podcasts, you've probably heard other people talk about that as well. And so it actually genuinely does help when you leave a rating or a review. I don't even think it has to be necessarily a positive rating or a positive review. Like I don't think that actually matters, though that's obviously the preference. But if you just leave any kind of rating or review, I think it just shows like the algorithm on the podcast platform that you're listening on. I think it just says something to the algorithm that like people are finding this podcast, they're interacting with it, they're engaging with it. And so it recommends it to more people. And so like if you know any Avril fans in your life, or if you run an Avril fan page on your social media and you think more people would be interested in this podcast, definitely please share it with them. And it's available on so many different, like all the major podcast platforms like Apple, Spotify, YouTube, Amazon Music, Audible. Like it's available on so many, a wide variety of platforms that most people I think should be able to listen to it. And so, yeah, I just want to kind of stress the importance for like, as long as I have a moment to talk about that, just kind of stress the importance of leaving a rating or review because it actually does help other people find the show who might be interested in it. And I also want to mention, too, that you can leave comments on Spotify. I don't know about the other platforms. I don't think you can really do that. But on Spotify, there's always a poll that generates with every episode. And like it usually just defaults to the question of what did you think of this episode? But sometimes I can go in there and change it to something that's like more relevant to the episode. And I like, seeing the the answers that people give to the questions and stuff. But you can also leave comments there on like the individual episodes. But I just want to make a note that if you leave a comment and I don't reply, it's because Spotify doesn't do a very good job of notifying me when people leave comments. Like, I randomly looked at it the other day and I saw some that were from like a few months ago. So thank you if you have left me a comment, and if you've left me like a nice review or anything like that. Thank you very much for, your feedback. And it's always fun kind of seeing what people like about the show and like people's feedback when they listen and stuff. And it kind of helps us feel more like an interaction, because I'm just sitting here in front of a microphone talking by myself. But when, I see the feedback from people, it kind of helps it feel like more engaging in that way and like more interactive. So don't worry if you have left me a comment on Spotify and I don't reply to it, it's because I probably didn't know it was there. But at some point I do go in and check them, and I just kind of like give a little like or whatever, or like thanks for saying, thanks for leaving me the comment or whatever. And then the last housekeeping thing I want to address is emphasizing that extra content gets posted on the Instagram page that's for this podcast at Best Damn Avril Pod, which I always do mention at the end of every episode as well, but I just wanted to mention it at the top of the show in case you always like skip the outro. So like I will post little teasers for the episodes on the Instagram, but you can also like find out like if an episode is delayed or something like that. And I also post extra content. So like when I did, for example, the Let Go and Under My Skin anniversary episodes, I talked about like some of Avril's most iconic outfits or the most iconic moments or performances from those eras. And I posted like the actual pictures or video clips of those things, because obviously that's not conducive to the podcast. Like I can't actually post those things in an audio podcast, but anything like more visual, I will post that over on the Instagram page. So again, that's at Best Damn Avril Pod if you want to get some extra content related to the podcast. I'm not on any other platforms right now, like Facebook or X or TikTok or anything like that, because I just don't have the capacity to try running multiple social media platforms right now. But I am active over on Instagram. So I think I brought you pretty much up to date on everything that's been going on with me since the last episode. And so now I think is the perfect time to dive into all things Avril as we discuss the latest news and events that have happened since our previous episode. On September 24th, the YouTube channel Do Less uploaded a video detailing how Avril created her first TikTok with Tony Hawk and included new unseen interview clips from Avril filmed in 2021. On September 30th, country singer Nate Smith released his collaboration with Avril called Can You Die From a Broken Heart off his new album California Gold. The full album was released on October 4th. Can You Die From a Broken Heart was written by Kevin Fisher, Michael Matizik, and Tom Walker. It is the first original song Avril has recorded without writing credits. It debuted at number 2 on the Billboard Bubbling Under Hot 100 chart, meaning it missed debuting on the Billboard Hot 100 by 2 positions. The music video was released on October 18th, shot at St. George Mansion in Toronto, and directed by Nikki Fletcher and Mason Allen. Avril plays a black grand piano at night, evoking similar imagery to her 2019 video for I Fell in Love with the Devil. Fans also noted comparisons to her other music videos like Head Above Water and Let Me Go. Sum 41 frontman Deryck Whibley discussed Avril in his memoir Walking Disaster, My Life Through Heaven and Hell, which was released on October 8th. He discussed their marriage and subsequent divorce, citing career changes that led to them being physically and emotionally distant. Additionally, he suffered from a herniated disc that required months of recovery while Avril was on tour during the Best Damn Thing era. He wrote that while he, quote, couldn't have been more proud, he was constantly taunted by the press and often called Mr. Levine. There were also reports of Avril allegedly cheating on him, which he chose not to believe. In the book, he writes, "There was no single moment or situation that I could point to that caused things to turn. It wasn't like it had been going downhill for a while and turned into a bad relationship. We never fought and always seemed totally in lockstep with each other. Avril and I kept living separate lives until I couldn't take it anymore. Motivated by the lyrics of Tom Petty's I Need to Know, I decided to confront our problems and give her an ultimatum. We had to fix what was broken or I was moving on." He also writes that he was tired of being humiliated in the media and hoped the ultimatum would be a wake-up call. He wrote, "When she was finally at home for a few days, I laid it all out for her. We have to go back to the respectful, loving relationship that we had, or we need to just call it quits," I said. "This isn't working and I can't live like this anymore." Avril told me her decision. There was no crying, there was no big fight, there wasn't even much of a discussion. It was just over, end quote. In addition to details on their marriage and subsequent divorce, Deryck also included some unseen photos of Avril from that time. On October 21st, boy band Pow sampled the chorus of Girlfriend in their new song Boyfriend. In an article by Billboard magazine, the band said, "We've loved band sounds and Avril Lavigne's songs were always on our playlist. We think she was the first to show how punk can be so appealing in pop music. We're grateful she made it possible for us, and so we've worked hard to release Boyfriend." One of the members also stated, "For this remake, I listened to all of Lavigne's albums. I was drawn to her timeless drum sounds and couldn't get over the rawness and cool beat of the drums. I recently got an electric guitar and she's opened my eyes to acoustic real sound, and it's something K-pop should also look out for," end quote. A representative from their A&R also said, "We believe that youth culture is the essence of mainstream K-pop. Rebellious, grunge-like, and youthful innocence defines K-pop, and Pow's music is grounded in real rock and band sounds. It still feels like 2000s era, a period where analog and digital collide. That is why we find Avril Lavigne's music relevant, powerful, and resonating with people in their teens, 20s, and 30s. It's her greatest strength and the reason her music inspires us for interpretation." End quote. On October 22nd, Avril's cover of Bitch by Meredith Brooks leaked. It is unknown when this was recorded, but it was presumably sometime during the Love Sucks era, as Avril had talked about wanting to record a version of the song during that time. It is also not known what the cover was intended to be released for. On October 28th, songwriter Bonnie McKee posted a video on X showing her demo of the Head Above Water track Dumb Blonde and explained the story of how it was written. She captioned the post, "Absolutely loved working with Canadian pop queen Avril Lavigne on her girl power anthem Dumb Blonde. We wrote this track as an FU to people who underestimate the power of a blonde. Huge shout out to Nicki Minaj for jumping on the beat and doing what she does best." In the video, she wrote, "Avril stormed into the studio riled up because she'd just gotten in a fight with her boyfriend. She said he called her a dumb blonde and she was furious. I was livid for her too. What a prick. So we channeled her anger and made it into a bad bitch cheerleader anthem. And that's how Dumb Blonde was born." On October 29th, Avril announced she will be part of the lineup for the 2025 When We Were Young Festival, which will take place in Las Vegas next October. On November 1st, Avril appeared in a commercial for Uber Eats. On November 11th, Avril was interviewed for V Magazine's Hero Story. She discussed the Greatest Hits tour as well as her plans for her next album, saying, "I am looking forward to going back to the studio now, feeling very inspired to get into the creative process for the new album." End quote. On November 15th, Avril released a new beer pong merch collection, including a table, ping pong balls, and red solo cups with her album logos on them. On November 19th, songwriter Lauren Christie posted an Instagram reel saying she lobbied for Anything But Ordinary to be the lead single of Let Go instead of Complicated. On November 22nd, a holiday merch collection was released, including a new hoodie and sweatpants set, Christmas ornaments, a blanket, and a studded belt. Avril also collaborated with the Soundwaves Art Foundation to create 2 pieces for the Special Olympics to support their Healthy Athletes program. They created artwork of the Soundwaves for Complicated and Skater Boy with a limited edition autographed by Avril. Complicated was featured in the trailer for the Netflix film Time Cut. And Nobody's Home was featured in the first episode of the British comedy series Big Mood. So clearly a lot of things going on since the last episode that we need to discuss. So first, sharing my thoughts on Can You Die From a Broken Heart. When I first heard the preview that Nate posted, which I had talked about in the last episode, I was like, at that time, only the preview had been posted, so I just gave my thoughts on that little teaser, but the full song hadn't been out yet. But just from that little teaser, I knew, I was like, oh, this song is going to be really good. And I would say that when I heard the final version, like the full version of it, I still thought it was a really good song, but I think I was a little bit underwhelmed in the sense that I think it could have just used a proper bridge and a final chorus to end on. Like it feels just a little bit short, which a lot of songs, unfortunately, nowadays tend to be that way. Like a lot of artists tend to be skipping out on bridges, and like the songs are just so short. They're like 2.5 minutes now, and they kind of tend to like cut off really early where it's like, oh, that could have really used like a final chorus or something to end on. So I do think the song could have benefited from just like being filled out a little bit more. But in general, I really liked the lyrics of it. And I mean, can we just take a second to praise Nate Smith's vocal ability? Like he reminds me a lot of Chris Stapleton in that kind of raw, vulnerable kind of like just heart-wrenching, gut-wrenching voice that he has. Like I would have been fine with this song even if Avril wasn't on it, to be honest. Like I mean, Avril did a great job on the song as well. Like she was hitting some sky-high notes as she always does. And, you know, I definitely think this collaboration of theirs was better than Bulletproof. Like I have not really gone back to Bulletproof since it came out. Like I've listened to it maybe a couple of times. And every time that they performed it together live, it's always been like, you know, impressive to see Avril like hit those notes live and stuff. And I think that they play off each other really well in live performances and everything. But this song, I think, is just another level from Bulletproof. And I really like the meaning of it because I think even though it's about a breakup, I kind of tend to interpret these types of lyrics. Like every time Avril does a breakup song, I always tend to interpret it with like looking at it through a lens of death for some reason, but that's just how I tend to interpret these lyrics. And so I think you could look at it through that way as well. If you really look through the lyrics, you can potentially spin it to interpret it about you know, mourning someone after death, which I think just the phrase, can you die from a broken heart? I think so many of us have been through situations like that. And it doesn't just have to be about some heartbreaking breakup that you went through, but we've all been through something in our lives, whether it was a breakup or losing a friend or losing someone through death or, you know, a tragic illness or a tragic accident that's happened. Like we've all been through something in our lives that has caused us to be like, you know, we feel so brokenhearted that we're like, man, I actually feel like I could die. I'm so like sad and depressed and feel so hopeless. And I have to say, I kind of related to that as well. Like this song basically came out right in the thick of me getting ready to move to my new apartment when I was really, really fed up with the neighbor situation that I was dealing with for so long that, you know, I was sad like all the time because I felt like I couldn't just like live and exist in my own living space. And there were times where I had to like physically leave my own apartment just to get peace and quiet, and I couldn't sleep. And sometimes I was so anxious. Like I actually felt anxious being in my own house a lot of the time. And sometimes it's like I felt like I couldn't eat and things like that. I think I actually cried on a near daily basis from that. And so sometimes it's like I was so sad, so depressed, so hopeless that like, you know, nothing ever felt like it was going to get better and those kinds of things. And like I was having to leave my own home and move to a completely different place just to get my life back, basically. So yeah, I mean, I was in that place where I was like feeling so brokenhearted that I was like, you know, I felt like I was going to die because I was so distraught like all the time. And so I definitely think that this song really brings you to that place. Like if you have been in that place before, or you're in that place now where you feel like I am so distressed and so distraught over whatever situation has happened to me, that this song just like really hits hard when you're in that place. Like I think if you're not in that place, you're kind of like, oh, this is a really nice like emotional song. Like, wow, listen to those vocals. But I think when you're actually in the thick of a really tough situation and you're actually feeling the exact feelings that they talk about in the song, and like that first chorus when Nate's vocals hit, like before Avril even comes on the scene, when Nate's vocals hit and he's got those really rough, like just gut wrenching vocals, where he's like, they say time heals all wounds, is it ever enough, and stuff. Like, I mean, that just like cuts you to the core hearing those, like I can so imagine like Chris Stapleton singing this song. Like that's kind of what it made me think of. So like if you've ever heard Chris Stapleton sing, and you know like he can like just rip those kinds of vocals, that's the feeling that I felt when I heard Nate Smith do Can You Die From a Broken Heart. It just like it cut me to the core because I was like exactly in that place that he was, like that emotional place that he was singing from. And then, you know, you hear Avril's vocals come in, and some people said that they didn't like Avril's vocals on the song because they felt like she was trying too hard to like match his kind of country voice or like his country kind of like sound. I'm not sure that I really got that vibe. I will say though, I think the coffee line is a little bit like cringy. I see you in my morning coffee grounds. I can't drink coffee now. It makes me bitter as hell. Like I thought that was like the only line I think I would have changed in the song. Like for as much as like this song is really like heart-wrenching and gut-wrenching to listen to, I think they were trying a little bit too hard with that coffee reference. That's like the only thing that kind of took me out of it. But I think in terms of like how Avril's vocals actually sound on the song, so what's interesting about this song too with the writing is that normally when Avril even just collaborates on songs, she always insists on having a writing credit somewhere. So like she might write her own verse, but this time she did not do that. So it's really interesting that she had absolutely no involvement with the writing of this song. Yeah, I mean, I just have to say, like, her vocals, like, if nothing else, like, if she didn't really contribute anything writing-wise to the song, just the vocals that she contributed, I do think it's kind of neat and interesting that they decided to make this a duet between them, because I don't know that the song necessarily needed to be a duet between them. Like, I think it could have worked fine as a solo version with just Nate singing it, but I do think having that female vocal in there kind of like, because it is about a breakup, having that female perspective in there kind of helps it feel more like they're playing off of each other and like both sides of the story are being told. Because like Avril's verse does kind of talk about like, well, yeah, like this is how you feel, but this is how I felt. Like this is why I left the relationship. Like, so it does kind of like add more dynamics to the song when you have like those two different perspectives happening. I would really, really love to see a live performance of this song. I don't know if that's ever going to happen, because I think the song might be kind of difficult for Avril to do live, but I would, if there's ever a chance for them to perform it live, I would really love to see them perform this live. I think it could be so stunning, like done live. And then talking about the music video, so Bulletproof did not have a video, but this one did. I think the music video was okay. It was clearly like not super high budget, but I like the scenes of Avril in the bathtub, and like I liked the location where they shot it, where it was like this chateau or like mansion that they shot it at that had some really beautiful scenes in it. But it was definitely quite like a simple video, which is like fine. That's fine. Not every video has to have like supreme special effects and all this like crazy stuff going on. I will say though, I didn't really like the zombie eyes effect, and I think the effect kind of got lost in translation. Like, I think when the video first came out, a lot of people were confused. They didn't really understand what the white eyes were supposed to represent. And it's basically saying, like, can you die from a broken heart? Like, I'm already dead. I'm like a zombie, you know? I think they probably could have gotten that effect across a little bit more. Like, I think it was a little bit too subtle that you, like, almost miss it. I think they probably could have tried to like put more special effects makeup on them to like make them look a little bit more like zombie-like maybe than just the eyes. I just think that the eyes effect, I don't think it was like done particularly well. And like, I think it kind of just took me out of it. Like, I think they could have, like, I understand what they were going for with the theme of being like, oh, we're like zombies because we're like dying from a broken heart. But I feel like they could have just decided not to like really bother with that and just kind of let the video be what it was. Just sing the song, do a beautiful video for it, and kind of just leave it at that. I think trying to have this like zombie effect on it kind of like almost like cheapened it actually in a way. Like, I get maybe to them they thought they were like elevating the story of it, but I feel like it just ended up doing the opposite, where it kind of took me out of it, and I felt like it was kind of like cheap looking, and I don't think it necessarily accomplished what it meant to accomplish. And I think the video would have just been better if it had just stood on its own. Like, let's just do a performance video. And having Avril like on that black grand piano definitely reminded me of her video for I Fell in Love with the Devil. And I think all that gothic imagery as well kind of made people think of like the Let Me Go video and stuff. There was like a couple other problems I had with the video as well. That number one, I think Avril could have worn a better outfit. Like, the skirt was okay, but I didn't understand why she was wearing like a random hoodie on top. Like, it just kind of felt like she just threw something on. I think she could have had a really nice gown or something to wear that would have maybe worked with the like tone of the song a little bit better. And then I also have a problem with the lip syncing as well. Like, a lot of her videos, unfortunately, for some reason, she always has such difficulty with the lip syncing. I don't know why, because I don't think it's really that hard to lip sync properly. Or for whatever reason, whoever's editing the videos doesn't do a very good job of finding the clips that actually, like, where her mouth is actually synced properly. But you can definitely notice that in this video. Like, I think Nate is doing a pretty decent job with the lip syncing. There's like a couple moments where Avril, you know, it seems like she's trying really hard to like emote properly so that she does look like she's singing with like the proper emotion. But there's definitely some scenes where her mouth movements are like totally off. And I don't know if that was a her thing or again, like an editing choice, like they didn't pick the right clips that matched or whatever. But I just think like these are such silly mistakes, like kind of amateurish mistakes that could be fixed so easily, that would just bring the video to that much better of a level if they just like paid attention to those kinds of details. I think the video had a decent treatment or like a decent concept for it. Really beautiful location that they filmed at. Really cool scene to have like Avril playing on the piano and stuff. And the scenes of them on the rocks in front of the water, that was like very head above water-esque. But definitely they could have like found Avril a better outfit, and the mouth movements could have been better with the lip syncing. I think they could have abandoned the zombie eye effect and just let it be a really beautiful emotional video without like needing to do this weird storyline that like I think it was lost on a lot of people. But overall, I definitely prefer this collaboration to Bulletproof. I haven't really gone back to Bulletproof since it came out, but Can You Die From a Broken Heart, I have played it a handful of times, I would say, since it came out, especially in those moments where I have been feeling pretty low. And I'm like, oh, this song, like, this is what, you know, really resonates with me at this moment. Okay, the next thing to talk about is Deryck's book that he wrote, and I didn't actually read the book myself, but there were articles posted in the media about the chapter that he wrote about his divorce from Avril, and, you know, obviously, like, the Avril Band-Aids community and stuff was talking about it. So I did read the articles kind of summarizing what Deryck wrote about it in the book. It is kind of interesting that after all these years that we finally hear from the source themselves about kind of what led to their divorce. Because I think for a long time, people were wondering about, you know, because they had known each other for a long time and they seemed really good together. And then they announced their divorce from out of nowhere. And I think, but they're like still friends to this day. And so I think people have always been a little bit confused, like, I wonder, like, what happened. I think it's just natural to kind of wonder, like, when celebrity breakups happen, people always want to know, like, what happened and stuff. And I just assumed that that would always remain private, which would be totally fine, and that we would never know. But it's interesting that Deryck did choose to talk about that in his book. And, I think it's kind of not unexpected. Like, I think it's kind of what a lot of people assumed had happened, because like the fact that they were still friends, or they are still friends afterwards, and like Deryck even worked on Avril's album that she like wrote about it, which I always found a little bit odd, but he helped her with that album. I always assumed that like nothing super dramatic had really happened. Like sometimes relationships just fizzle out, they just run their course, and it's unfortunate that that happened, especially because they were married to each other and they were really good friends and everything. But also like Avril was so young, and, she was touring the world all the time. And I think it's just kind of like, unfortunately, something that naturally happens in like Hollywood relationships, is that people just get too busy and they just can't spend enough time with each other, and things, they just kind of naturally like drift apart, I guess, which is basically what I think happened. I guess it's kind of interesting to have the answers to what happened, and that Deryck was willing to share it and open up about it. And I don't know if he talked to Avril at all before he like was going to publish the book and mention like, I am talking about this in the book. Like, are you okay with that? Like, we have no idea if they had any kind of conversation about it, but presuming that he might have talked to Avril about it and she was fine with him sharing that, I think that's like really brave of them both to be willing to like open that part of themselves up. Because like I said, that's information that I think should remain private ideally, and it's totally fine if they wanted to keep that private. But the fact that they were willing to open up about it and share that part of their lives with the entire world, I think is something really kind of to be commended, I guess. Like, it's kind of a courageous thing to do, to be so vulnerable to share something like that with like millions of people, and that's published in a book like forever. So I think, in spite of what happened between them, and that, it was unfortunate that they ended up divorcing, it's nice that they are still friends and that they support each other. Like, like I said, Deryck helped Avril work on her album afterwards, and they still perform together sometimes. Like, they'll be on the same lineup sometimes for like festivals and stuff. And they even performed together pretty recently on Avril's tour. It was one of those festivals that they were both at the same time, and they performed in Too Deep together. And I think it's just very clear that there's still a lot of love there, and they both support each other. And I think that's really rare, like in any kind of divorce proceedings, but especially with Hollywood divorces, those are always pretty like messy, and a lot of stuff gets said in the media about it and stuff. And so I think the fact that like, even though it's unfortunate that like the relationship had to end and everything, and Deryck ended up, getting married to someone else and everything by now, I think he might even have a kid. The fact that they both have basically moved on, quite a long time ago. They both moved on with their lives and are both doing different things now. And like Sum 41, I think, is starting to kind of retire and those kinds of things. I think the fact that there is still a lot of love and support there for each other really says a lot about the overall nature of their relationship. Like, even if the relationship ended, it shows that the relationship was strong. And I think it just speaks to like each of their characters that, there is no drama between them. It's just like really nice to see that when that's not really the norm. And then there was also a portion in his book where he discussed sexual abuse that he faced from his manager at the time, and that Avril was like I think Avril might have been one of the first people that he opened up to about that. And she was like, that's like not normal, right? Like, I guess he had kind of internalized all of it, and he was just like trying to kind of downplay it or like sweep it under the rug. And Avril was kind of a big supporter for him at that time to tell him like, you need to talk to someone about this, or like that's not right. And so I think it's really something special as well, or like something that's really nice to hear about Avril, because like, we like to think that Avril is a nice person and stuff, but we don't really know her. And so it's always nice to hear these stories from people who do know her that affirm her character. And so like the fact that Deryck could go to Avril with this kind of thing, and something that he hadn't really talked about with other people in his life, and that not only Avril was someone he could trust with it, but Avril was like probably one of the ones who propelled him to do something about it. I think someone had talked about this on Band-Aids as well, because we had talked about this on the forum. At that time, this was like the mid-2000s, and we were not really having these kinds of conversations about like the Me Too movement hadn't happened yet, and sexual abuse, sexual misconduct in Hollywood and the entertainment industry and stuff. Like, those conversations just simply were not happening. And those were the kinds of things that would get swept under the rug for sake of like keeping the status quo and stuff. And it was kind of like one of those things, like if you want to make it in this town, you better keep your mouth shut about this kind of thing. The fact that Avril wasn't willing to play into that game, and that, her husband at the time brought this thing to her and she said, that's not right, and I'm going to help you in whatever way I can and support you in whatever way I can to make this right, to like bring this to the light, and like we're not standing for this. I think that was like really kind of progressive actually on Avril's part to recognize like the abuse for what it was and to say like this is not okay, because at the time, like again, that kind of went against the cultural norms of the time. And so for her to kind of have her feet on the ground and a good head on her shoulders enough at that point, like even though she herself was in Hollywood, like she's still that Napanee part of her, that Canadian girl part of her that, still had her roots in Canada, and she was very close to her family and everything. That part of her that could recognize the like BS side of Hollywood and be able to support her husband in a time when that would have been actually really difficult to do and kind of almost controversial to do. So again, Deryck was super brave and courageous to be able to share that part of his story in this book, and for millions of people to read that. So just kind of wanted to mention that, like the things that Deryck was willing to share in his book and his willingness to be open and vulnerable about those kinds of things. The next thing I wanted to talk about is this leak of Avril's cover of Bitch by Meredith Brooks that we just randomly got. It was so random, but I really love this cover, if I'm being honest. Like when I am somewhat familiar with the original song, but I've never really listened to the song in full. So when I listened to Avril's version of it, it's like so 90s, 2000s-esque, which I know is like when the song came out, but they did such a good job with the production of like making it really sound like it was from that era. But like I don't think it comes off as like a cheesy thing. Like I think some people thought maybe it sounds a little too like dated. But to me, I just really love it. I think this sound really suits Avril, and maybe that's because that's kind of the era that she came out of as well. But I would be so up for her doing more music in this style. And it's funny because she had talked about, like in the Love Sucks era, she had talked about wanting to do a cover of this song. So I feel like that's probably the era that it was recorded in. If I had to guess, like we don't really know, but I would assume it was recorded sometime in the last couple of years or last few years maybe. But it's interesting to think why it would have been recorded. Like if she was either just doing it for fun, or maybe it was going to be added as a bonus track to the Love Sucks album. It was going to be released as a standalone cover, if it was going to be a Spotify cover instead of Hello or something like that. We don't really know. And I think it's interesting to think about like why it would have been recorded. Maybe it was going to be put on like the Skate Your Boy movie soundtrack or something, or maybe it was recorded for some other kind of like outside project that's not necessarily her project. Like who knows? I hope maybe one day it will get released officially, just because I would like to be able to stream it officially. And I just think she did such a great job with this. Like, it's so random. It's so random. But like, I honestly think like for being such a random song, she did a phenomenal job with it. Like just, I think the way it was produced and the way her vocals sound on it and everything, like this song, it's like she could have written it herself. Like I think that's probably why she wanted to cover it, because it's like the song that she wishes she could have written. I think she actually did say that. Like if there was any song that she wishes she could write, it would be this one. But it's like, this is Avril. Like this sums up who Avril is like as a person. And I think the sound of it just suits her so well. And like her attitude and everything, like I think it's because she was so like pumped about singing it. That's why she sounds really good on it. But like, just, yeah, like that kind of 90s, 2000s, like pop rock production on it is really like so Avril coded. And like her kind of just like sass and her attitude while she's singing it, and the way her vocals sound, like it's just so suited for her. I think she did such a great job with this cover, and I would definitely go back and listen to this like a bunch of times. So hopefully maybe one day it could officially see the light of day, because I think people, like even outside of the Avril fandom, I think people might really go crazy for this cover if they heard it, and it would kind of help them see Avril maybe in a new light. It might make people kind of reconsider her, like if they only know her for her songs, like her hits that she had some years ago. And then it's like, oh, Avril doing this song, like she sounds great on it. And like it kind of just like reminds them like that she exists, I guess. So hopefully one day this could have like officially see the light of day. The next thing that I want to talk about is my commentary on If Anything But Ordinary had been the lead single instead of Let Go instead of Complicated. So like I had said before, Lauren Christie, who helped write the Let Go album, had uploaded a reel on her Instagram talking about how she had originally lobbied really hard for Anything But Ordinary to be the lead single of Let Go, but obviously Complicated was the one that ended up getting chosen. I just think it's really interesting to think about what that would have been like if that had happened. Because I know it's funny how Anything But Ordinary was in the running as a single, like 2 different times actually. So Lauren wanted it to be the lead single. And then more towards the end of the album cycle, L.A. Reid, who was in charge of the label at the time, L.A. Reid wanted it to be the last single from the album after she had like a string of 3 hit singles, kind of like ending with a bang, I guess. You know, Anything But Ordinary, I think, could have had the potential to be a hit, just like all the other Matrix singles were big hits. And I understand why Lauren probably thought it would have made a good lead single, because it would have really put forth this idea that Avril was like a rebellious wild child and like not like your typical pop star and those kinds of things. Like I think it would have really emphasized that point a lot, but I also understand why it wasn't chosen, because I think while I think Anything But Ordinary could have been a good choice for a single or good choice for a lead single, I think Complicated, I mean, it's clear Complicated ended up being the right decision because it's one of her biggest hits to this day. It was what launched her into the stratosphere of stardom. So clearly they didn't make like the wrong choice. But I think Complicated maybe put forth that same idea about who Avril was, but in a more subtle way, maybe, than Anything But Ordinary. I do think it's interesting to think about how Avril's career would have been different if different choices were made. And that's actually an episode idea I have planned for the future at some point. I would really love to go through and kind of imagine like just like a what if scenario, like if Avril had made different decisions in her career, how I think that would have affected the trajectory of her career, I guess. So one of those things to consider is If Anything But Ordinary had been the lead single instead of Complicated. And then the last thing that I want to talk about before I wrap up here is just sharing my thoughts on where I think Avril might be at with the next album, because it's funny because like a couple of years ago, she was starting to work on the album. She had worked with Tommy Prophet. She had worked with John Feldman again. She was working with Youngblood and Gale and the guys from All Time Low. Like she kept saying that she was almost done with it and that she kept like wanting to get it out by the time she was going to go back on the road again, which obviously never happened. And then she kept saying stuff like, I'm going to go back, like after the tour wrapped, she was like, I'm going to go look at all the music I've done and figure out how I want to like put it out into the world, I guess. So it sounded like she was getting really close to finishing. But now with the last couple of media quotes that we've had from her, she sounds almost like she might be starting over, because she's like, I'm so excited to get back into the studio. Like, I'm so inspired to make my next great record. And it's like, but didn't you like already make it? Like, haven't you been in the studio for like literal years? And like, don't you already have an album like ready to go? So it sounds to me like it's possible she may actually be starting over or going back to the drawing board and possibly scrapping like basically everything that she's done up to this point, which is maybe kind of concerning, but also kind of interesting. I mean, we have no idea what she's been working on. We have had some little leaks here and there, but we don't know if they're from the Love Sucks album or if they're from this album or whatever album they might be from. And so I do think it's possible that for like what she has been doing so far with the 8th album is that maybe she wasn't quite sure of the direction that she wanted to go. Like she might have been continuing in the pop punk direction, and then maybe she wasn't feeling that anymore. Or like we do know she was leading into some like rap and hip hop kinds of stuff too, with like the Tyga stuff and everything. So it's possible that she wasn't very inspired, or like, you know, the breakup with Matson had happened and she probably wrote a bunch of songs about it. But then, you know, by now it's like that was well over a year ago. It was like a year and a half ago at this point. And so it's possible that maybe she just doesn't relate to those songs anymore. And so much time has passed that maybe she just wants to completely revamp the direction that she's going in and like revamp the sound, revamp what she's writing about. So it's kind of unclear what 2025 is going to bring. Like, I know that there were rumors of the Greatest Hits tour going international, like going to South America and Asia. But like, it doesn't seem like she's going to be announcing any more tour plans right now. Like, I feel like if the Greatest Hits tour was going to keep going, I think they probably would have made an announcement by now. But it's still always possible that she could go back on tour next year, whether it's the Greatest Hits tour or just like festival dates or something completely new. We don't know if she's just going to remain in the studio all year next year, or if she's still working on the documentary or the Skater Boy movie, or like she's been wanting to do a Christmas album for years too, and that could possibly be something she's working on. So she's always working on stuff in the background, like I said, with the documentary that's been going for a couple of years now that we're not sure what's happening with that, and the Skater Boy movie that's always being worked on, and this Christmas album that she's been wanting to do for so long. So I suppose she's always got things cooking, you know, but it'll be interesting to see what 2025 brings. I just hope that like we do hear some kind of update. Even if she just decides to go back on tour while she's in the middle of working on the album, I just hope that like it's not just silence all year, I guess, and that we, you know, still hear from her every now and again. But even if it does end up being a quieter year from her, I have plenty of episode ideas that I want to get to. So even if there's not a heck of a lot that we can talk about as far as she's concerned, like new stuff, there's so many ideas that I have for things that I want to talk about on the podcast that I think will keep us entertained in the meantime. So for now, we conclude this edition of the Best Damn Avril Lavigne podcast. Be sure to subscribe on your preferred podcast platform so you can get new episodes directly in your feed. And please don't forget to take a minute to leave a rating or review to help more fans find the show. We're currently streaming on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube Music, Amazon Music, and Audible. Be sure to join me again next time on the Best Damn Avril Lavigne podcast. The Best Damn Avril Lavigne podcast is hosted, produced, and edited by Andrea DiFrancesco. Theme music is HD and Lights by J. Powell Flicks. Follow the latest podcast news on Instagram at bestdamnavrilpod or email bestdamnavrilpod@yahoo.com.